But what did you expect? If you invite a lawyer to give a graduation speech, you're going to hear about the law. If you had invited a plumber to give the graduation speech, you would hear about pipes and leaks. If you had invited an electrician, you would have gotten an electrifying speech. I could go on, I won't. Anyway, but perhaps I'm biased, but I think that our Constitution is the best the world has ever seen. Some admirers of the Constitution think that it is providential. Some think that it is simply the product of happy and improbable circumstances. Either way, I believe that our Constitution could not have endured and could not have provided the framework for our country's growth if it did not rest on a deep understanding of human nature and human behavior. And for that reason, the essential features of our Constitution and our legal system can teach us lessons that are applicable to life. What are these lessons? One of the most basic is the need to be rigorous and disciplined in identifying the things that are most fundamental. A striking feature of our Constitution is its brevity. It's only about 4,600 words long. By comparison, when a Constitution of Europe was proposed some years ago, it contained over 160,000 words, and therefore was roughly 35 times as long as our Constitution. Our Constitution is brief because it focuses on the things that are essential. It sets out the structure of the government, it protects basic rights, and then it leaves just about everything else to be decided by the American people, acting through their elected representatives. Had the framers taken a different approach, I feel quite sure that our Constitution that was adopted in 1787, back in Baron von Steuben's day, would not still be in force. The framers' strategy, a disciplined identification of what is fundamental, has served our country well. And this same strategy is a good one to implement in our personal lives. Now, there are people who have little pocket constitutions and they carry them around. I don't suggest that all of us write up our own little personal constitution and keep it with us in a pocket for the rest of our lives. But we can make the effort to keep in mind what is fundamental and permanent in our lives. And that is absolutely critical, because the things that call out most loudly for our attention on a daily basis are not necessarily the things that matter most in the end. They are not the things that are going to count on our final report card. And we can all pray that when we receive our final report card, there will be a very generous degree of great inflation. Another instructive feature of our Constitution is that it guards against improvident change. The Constitution is exceedingly hard to change. An amendment must be approved by 2/3 of both houses of Congress, and it must be ratified by 3/4 of the states. And because the amendment process is so difficult, our Constitution has been amended only 27 times. This despite the fact that more than 10,000 proposed amendments have been considered in Congress. Framers deliberately made the amendment process onerous, and it is instructive to consider why they did that. Part of the explanation, I think, involves their understanding of the nature of the fundamental rights that are protected by the Constitution. I'm sure we all remember the famous words of the Declaration of Independence. All men are created equal, and they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That short and famous statement speaks volumes. And one of the most important things it says is that there are certain moral principles that are true and immutable. These principles of right and wrong are not relative or circumstantial. They are not of our making, and it is not within our power to change them, even though at times we might find that convenient. Founders also had a realistic understanding of human nature. They did not think that human beings are or ever will be angels. On the contrary, humans at times may be overcome by fear, anger, envy, sloth, and greed. So they fortified their work against the ill winds they knew would sometimes blow. They knew that times would inevitably come when the people would be tempted to make hurried and unwise changes. The precipitating event might be a domestic or an international crisis. It might be overt or subtle pressure of others, the temptation to take the easy road and just go along. It might be the latest intellectual fad. It might be the perception of where history is going. But whatever the cause, they knew that such times would come. And they knew that in the long run, the country's well-being depended on the ability to resist these temptations. The Supreme Court expressed this point eloquently in a case called Ex parte Milligan shortly after the Civil War. This is what it wrote. The framers foresaw that troublous times would arise when rulers and people would become restive, and the principles of constitutional liberty would be in peril unless established by irreparable law. The Constitution of the United States applies to all classes of men at all times and under all circumstances. This same fundamental idea that there are certain principles that we cannot compromise without paying a fearsome price applies to our personal lives. The opinion in Ex parte Milligan spoke of troublous times, a majestic biblical phrase. And for almost all of us, there will be troublous times and times of temptation. When they come, if we have fixed and clear principles that are written in bold letters on our hearts, we may be able to find our way through. If we don't, we can easily go astray. Right now, in the world outside this beautiful campus, troubled waters are slamming against some of our most fundamental principles. Support for freedom of speech is declining dangerously, especially where it should find broadest and widest acceptance. In a book called The Idea of the University, St. John Henry Newman saw the university as a place for reasoned debate. Today, very few colleges live up to that ideal. This place is one of the few that does, and you are very fortunate to have had that experience. Religious liberty is also threatened. When you venture out into the world, you may find yourself in a job or a community or a social setting where you will be pressured to endorse ideas you don't believe or to abandon core beliefs. It will be up to you to stand firm, and as Bishop Caggiano said last night, it will be up to you to speak out. So far, I have spoken about the ways in which our Constitution guards against rash and unwise change, but this is only half the picture. Our Constitution has survived and flourished because it was designed to accommodate change. We are a nation of change. When Alexis de Tocqueville toured the United States in the 1840s, he marveled at the restlessness of Americans. And since Tocqueville's day, Americans have never stopped racing toward the future. Our Constitution would not be an authentic expression of who we are as a people, and it surely could not have lasted if it had tried to stop this passion for change. And it does not. It provides a few fixed principles and rules of operation, and those cannot be changed. But otherwise, it entrusts the future to the good sense of the American people. As I said, the founders knew that humans are not angels, but at the same time, they did not expect the Americans who would populate the new republic they were creating to be self-centered individuals, obsessed only with achieving maximum satisfaction of their individual desires. Their ideal of a citizen was very different. It was a person of character, who was strong, prudent, temperate, and fair, a person who was willing to sacrifice for the good of others, for family members, friends, neighbors, and fellow citizens. The framers saw many of these traits in ordinary people, and they were confident that ordinary people are capable of responsible self-government. Now, this doesn't happen accidentally. It happens through teaching, by strong families and by institutions like this. But because the founders thought that the American people were up to the task, they did not try to stop the people from making changes that don't undermine what really matters. In the same way, your challenge during troubled times will be to distinguish between dedication to principles that never change and mere nostalgia for the past. In order to engage our society and try to make it a better place, that is essential. And that requires judgment and prudence. That isn't easy, but what you have learned and the habits of mind that your education has inculcated should help you to meet that challenge. Our society needs you to do just that. In meeting that challenge, I hope you will keep in mind two other lessons that we can draw from our Constitution and our legal system. The first is respect for reason and civil discourse. Our legal system is built on the premise that it is possible for fair and open-minded people to solve their problems by reasoning together, by a process of rational and respectful argumentation. I hope you will take that approach in your lives. And this brings me to the last lesson that I want to mention. Our legal system affords great respect for tradition. If you read almost any opinion issued by any court in this country, you will see that the text is full of citations to past court decisions. These decisions, which we call precedent, are entitled to great respect. Now, they are not written in stone, and some of them can be and should be overruled, but they are not to be lightly discarded. This principle has application in life as well. We know much more than our ancestors about many things, but not necessarily about what is most important, including the way to live a good and meaningful life. And so there should be a presumption in favor of venerable wisdom. We should also take care to preserve our connections to our own past. Some time ago, I was speaking to a law school